in the blank. You're not getting any younger, so
stop listening to that biological clock.
Hey you! Yes, you. Welcome to the You're Not Getting Any Younger podcast, a podcast for people who want to disrupt their lives for a good reason, to make it count. I'm your host, Jen Glantz, and every week I'll drop a new episode with stories from real people just like you, who woke up one morning and decided to make big changes, starting with small things. We'll cover topics like entrepreneurship, love, failure, and self-care. Hey, you're not getting any younger, so let's make this an adventure. Ready? Today's episode is brought to you by Jen and Juice Coaching by yours truly. For the past 5 years, I've worked with over 100 people to help them feel, well, less stuck. Whether you're looking to change careers, start a side hustle, or just get a strategy for your life, head on over to jenglantz.com/coaching and you can find out about my 1-hour coaching specials that will help you feel like you can finally cross those things off your to-do list and start whatever kind of project, life change, or dream that you have. Hey, any youngers, it's me, your host, Jen Glantz. Welcome back to another episode of the You're Not Getting Any Younger podcast. And hey, welcome to August. The very first thing I thought about at the start of this month was that 2020 is practically over. I feel like in the months in August and September, I start to feel like we're wrapping up the year. And it was a weird feeling thinking that 2020 is almost over. For a lot of us, we're glad it's almost over, but it's also really hard because nobody knows what kind of year 2021 will be. I'm a big believer in not planning too far in advance. A lot of people I know, and I see this on social media, are already just dismissing 2020 and making these big plans for 2021. And all I can say is get insurance on your 2021 plans. And what I mean by that is nothing is given. And you never know the hectic, the chaotic things that are going to happen next year, next month, tomorrow. So yes, I'm not trying to be negative and say don't plan, but I'm also trying to be realistic. Things don't change just because the years change. They change because we make changes. So if there's things right now that you're dreading, you're not happy with, you wish you could do differently, what changes can you make? And obviously you can't pack up and take that honeymoon or that vacation or go very far, but there's other things you can do. I have not left Brooklyn or this area for many, many months, since March, which is crazy. I'm the kind of person that was traveling constantly before this. And at first it was hard. I would say the hardest part was the first couple of weeks, the realization that my life was going to drastically change. I couldn't live the way I used to live. But I have to say, I have found ways to make that okay. And what I mean by that is now I enjoy taking walks around the neighborhood that I never spent much time in the year I lived here before. I enjoy figuring out fun games to play in the apartment. I enjoy things that I never did before. So sure, plan ahead and sure, get ready for a new year, but don't dismiss the time you have right now. Don't dismiss the August and the September, and don't just wait for 2020 to be over because you never know what it's going to look like in 2021. Not like I know. I wish I knew. I wish I had a little bit of psychic energy in me, but I don't know, and neither do you. Today's episode has nothing to do with what I just said. But today's episode is really special to me because it is with Gabi Conti. And Gabi is somebody I met many, many years ago. She was hosting a show for Elite Daily. I was in LA. I got to be on the show and meet her, and I had such a big girl crush on her. I wanted to be her best friend. She was funny and witty and clever and not scared to be herself. And I've stayed in touch with her throughout the years, but she recently came out with a book and she offered to send me the book. I'm actually in the book, but she offered to send me the book and I thought, okay, I'll read this book eventually. I got the book, I opened it up, I spent the whole night reading it. I could not put it down. And why I first dismissed the book was because I thought I'd have nothing in common with it. Turns out, it's a book that you could read at any point in your life. It's a book you can relate to. It's funny, it's unusual, and it's so well done. Gabi puts together this incredible book that reads like it's a Cosmo magazine, and you're going to love it. And today on the podcast, she gives some of the most unusual and amazing dating advice in the world. Not only dating advice, but relationship, self-confidence advice, self-worth advice. I loved having her on. If you're not familiar with Gabi, let me explain. She is a writer, host, comedian, storyteller, and the author of 20 Guys You Date in Your 20s. Gabi has been on 10,000 hours worth of dates in her 20s. I don't know. I think I'm pretty close to that. Maybe not 10,000, but I don't know, a lot of dates. And the book is not a dating book. It's not a dating manual. It's a relatable book for anybody who's ever had a relationship, a date, fallen in love, gotten their heart broken. Even if you're married and engaged or single, it's awesome. And I really think you're going to enjoy Gabi's perspective in today's interview. You know I'm going to say it, but if you like the show, please, please, please leave us a review on iTunes. It makes more people find the show, and I appreciate that. Also, come hang out with us in the secret You're Not Getting Any Younger Facebook group. There's 1,500 people there waiting to say hello to you. So I'll see you there. All my love, Jen Glantz.
Answer, how would you describe who you are and what you do to a person you just met at a party?
Oh my goodness. Okay. Well, I would probably say that I'm an author, and I would plug my book because it just came out. So I would tell them that I just wrote a book called 20 Guys You Date in Your 20s, which is a dating advice for anyone who's single at any age. I just happened to write it in my 20s. I would also tell them that I'm a contributing writer to Cosmopolitan, where I write about dating, and I'm also a host and a comedian.
I love it. And if I met you at a party, I'd be like, Gabi, I want to be your best friend. And that's what I thought about you, honestly, when we met years ago. Gabi was working on a show for Elite Daily, and we met. And I remember, I don't think I ever told you this, but I remember meeting you and being like, she is so cool. I want this person to be my friend.
Aww.
I had such a girl crush on you, which was crazy because when I was reading your book, and we're gonna talk about Gabi's book a ton, but 20 Guys You Date in Your 20s. If you don't know Gabi, you still get Gabi's personality in the book, which I think is so cool and so rare. So even if you don't know Gabi, I have a feeling that like 99.9 of you are going to read this book and be like, how can I be her best friend? So
you were so sweet. I had a similar reaction when I met you on the Elite Daily Show, because I was just, and you were already a published author at the time. And when I was hosting, I was working on like a very beginning version of this. So it was really inspiring to hear your story and how you got about to like writing your book. So yeah, so it's mutual.
So sweet. Well, I want to know from you because, okay, 20 Guys You Date in Your 20s, it is a real big summary, not only of a substantial part of your dating life and your relationship life, but it's so relatable to really everybody out there who has had all different kinds of experiences in dating. So I want to know, when did it hit you that you wanted to write a book about this?
I think, so I was a serial monogamous up until I dated the guy who's older. I won't spoil what happened, but basically that's like chapter 8 in the book, and it was a world shattering breakup for me. And when that, I kind of fell into another like rebound relationship right after that. And so then when the things ended with the rebound, I really felt the weight of both breakups, and Tinder came out, and I just found myself as being someone who was always dating as opposed to someone who was always in a relationship. And so I had kind of started blogging. I had always kept a blog through college, and I had started contributing to Hello Giggles, and I kind of just had taken all my like dating stories and kind of put it into this document. A very first draft of this book was actually a love journal I kept in high school. So I kind of combined like what I was contributing to the blogs I was writing for, and also like what my diary was, as well as kind of realizing that, you know, finding these like relatable types of guys that people date at any time in their life, and kind of just talking to my girlfriends over brunch, and then later with a licensed therapist about my dating disasters. And that kind of ended up being the book that I had worked on through my 20s. And then by the time I was about to hit 30, I was like, well, I got to publish this. And I was going to self-publish it, but luckily I was able to get a publisher, which I'm so grateful for, Chronicle.
You know, it's so interesting because a lot of people have ideas for books and they don't realize how long it takes to put it all together. And I appreciate you saying that this is something that you not only thought about for a while, but you compiled notes about for a while. And a question I had when I was reading through this book is, you know, you have all different types of guys you date in your 20s. but did you know at the time, or even after you ended the relationship with them or the relationship ended, that they were that kind of guy? And what I mean by that is oftentimes relationships end and we wallow in the sadness of it, but we can't pinpoint necessarily why. So how long did it take you to say, oh yeah, this guy, he is the epitome of a guy who's toxic, or this guy is the one who's not your boyfriend? How long did it take for you to take some of these stories and then realize like not only how the relationship ended, but how to categorize them?
It took a while, and it definitely was, I think it actually, what came first was the list of the types of relationships, types of guys, and then came the stories. Because I really wanted the list to be relatable, and I didn't want this to be a burn book. I really wanted to like offer like helpful advice. So like, for example, like the guy who's older initially was, and I guess I'm going to spoil this, but it's already in Cosmos, so whatever. So that guy lied to me about his age. So his first chapter was the guy who lies to you about his age, which my friends were like, that's not relatable. But, dating a guy who's significantly older than you, that is relatable for a lot of women. So that's so the list came. And then after the list, I kind of looked back at my dating past, and I looked at the different types of guys I dated that had fit into those things. And what was interesting is some of the stories that I wrote was like, I never kind of ever thought I would like talk about this guy again or reach out to him again, but it fit the type so well. So the types of the relationships in this book aren't necessarily all of the most like meaningful relationships I've had in my 20s, but it's more of like relatable types of relationships.
What advice do you have for somebody right now who is dating one of these guys, the guy who got away, the guy who's long distance, the guy you always go back to, somebody who's either still dating one of these or left one of these? What advice do you have for them about recovering from some of these relationships?
Sure. Well, I do think that every type in this book, you can actually like, it could turn into a relationship, and it could turn into a successful relationship, with the exception of the guy who's toxic, obviously. Mm-hmm. And that was a part that I did in my book, was I interviewed couples that had overcome these obstacles. Because I see these types as less of like, don't date this guy, but more of obstacles in relationships. But my advice, if you're going through a breakup, I think the biggest thing you should do right now is look at your past relationships and see if there's a pattern or a theme of why those relationships work, and then focus on building yourself up to be the strongest person you could possibly be, and be mindful of your past. And don't let your past baggage weigh you down in your present, but be aware if you have a type, like if you're always going for the guy that's better looking than you, and then you find yourself always being insecure because you're worried that your boyfriend is more attractive than you in your head, and then it ends up sabotaging the relationship. So maybe you want to like attract guys or find people that you don't feel that insecurity with. So I think if you're single right now, look at your past and find a way that you can try to break your patterns, which I thought I did in the book, and I didn't actually do until after the book. And that's how I think I landed my boyfriend now, who I'm with.
Yeah, and what was so interesting about this book versus maybe some other dating books is it wasn't like, hey, here's this kind of guy, here's my experience, avoid at all costs. It was like, hey, here's what I went through, here's what happened. And then Gabi ends every chapter in a very interesting way. Well, several interesting ways. She has quizzes in the book. She's got all different kinds of things in the book. The book feels less like a big textbook memoir and more like a episode or a magazine of Cosmo. But Gabi ends almost every chapter with talking to a couple or an expert, and you give real people advice, whether it's to the expert or the couple's eyes. So what made you decide to end these chapters, not necessarily on a positive note, but on a realistic note?
Because I think with dating advice that you should get more than one opinion. We do this anyway, right? Like if we're dating someone and we're not sure if we should break up with him or not, we get at least one or two different opinions. We ask our best friend, we ask our roommate, we ask our guy friend, we ask our friend who's in a couple, maybe we ask our parents, depending on what your relationship is like with your parents. So I thought, while I've done the field work to be a dating expert, meaning I've gone on 10,000 hours worth of dates, roughly, I've done a lot of dating, I do know with certain things I'm not really an expert. So like reaching out to someone like yourself for the chapter of the guy who you can't remember, and you being a professional bridesmaid, like you just like, that's something, of course, you meet people all the time. So what is a skill that you learn from that the readers can use if they're going on a lot of first dates and they're having a hard time keeping track of all the guys they're going on first dates with? And your advice was amazing. So I think, yeah, just realizing that I think getting like a first, second, third, and fourth opinion with dating advice is really helpful. And the dating books I had seen that was out there currently before I wrote this, I felt just so one-sided. It's always like, he's just not that into you. And I feel like it's always like, oh, you can't make this relationship work. And I kind of wanted to give readers the tools to say, look, here's the tools and you can make the decision of what you want to do with your relationship.
Yeah, and it's super appreciated because it's not one of those books that just talks at people. It's one of those books that I feel like is so inclusive of everyone's situation and everyone's issues that they might have with dating. So I thought that was really cool. But the part of the book that I was obsessed with, and I was telling Gabi earlier that I accidentally read this entire book in one night because I could not put it down. But at the end of every chapter, Gabi asks experts, she talks to real couples, but Gabi also reaches out to her exes. And not only does she reach out to them, but I don't know how you did this. She sends them the chapter. And it was so funny reading this book because it's a pretty long book. It's a lot, but I would race through the chapter just to get to the blue page in the book. That's like what the guy said. So I want you to tell us what the process was like sending these chapters to almost all the guys and getting their responses. What was that process like? Were you scared?
It was terrifying and therapeutic. And what actually, to give you a picture of where I was in my life as I was reaching out to all my exes, I had been living in LA forever. I moved to New York for a boyfriend. The relationship crashed and burned. And I still had to write the book. So I was living briefly with my parents in Connecticut as I was reaching out to all my exes. So it was just like so weird to be like, they're like, oh, how are you? And I'm like, great, just broke up with a boyfriend of 2 years. So I thought was the one, living with my parents, writing a book, killing it. It was just kind of like a very like weird place, and being in my childhood bedroom and all that stuff. But I did reach out to every guy because I thought it was only fair. And I also wanted to make sure, that since this was a book, if any like details they were uncomfortable with, I would take out, which I did. And I also changed all their names. It was interesting because I had some guys that were like super collaborative and helpful and supportive. I had other guys that didn't want to read the chapter, so I quoted them as saying that. And then I had some guys that tried to like gaslight me and be like, that didn't happen. But then I'm like, no, I know it did, but okay, I'll take out that detail that you think didn't happen.
I mean, I thought it was just so admirable that you like reached out and had a conversation with them. And it's hilarious because some of the guys write back like these long-winded, like semi-apologies or like coming to life moments where they're like, oh, I'm so sorry, Gabi. But then some guys are just like, this is true. And I haven't spoken to Gabi since she reached out the end. Like, it's just, I don't know. I think there's just something so cool about getting to meet the actual person through what they responded to you. But did you ever, so when you reached out to all of these guys, did you strike up a friendship with any of them after all these years, or was it just like a one and done conversation?
Yeah, I mean, some of them were more supportive and kind about it than others. Like definitely the guy who was not your boyfriend, like a lot of the guys I hadn't heard from since we broke up. And so it was kind of nice to like talk to them and kind of see, yes, they've like, they're married now or they're happy, but just to kind of see that there's like no bad blood or no awkwardness. And I feel like if I was to run into these guys on the street now, which is very likely, it would be not awkward. It would be like a really kind, like nice moment. I was the most scared to reach out to the guy who makes you do you, because that ended so abruptly and dramatically that I really thought that like he was gonna like press charges or something. And he ended up being like super cool about it, and we like follow each other on Instagram now, and like he's very supportive. So yeah, and then obviously the guy who's your person reaching out to my most recent ex was hard because the first time, because all of these other relationships had happened like after a lot of time had passed, and that one was still pretty recent as I was writing the book. And so the first response he had was he asked me to give him a different name, which is the name that's in there now. And that's all he had to say. And then, I gave him the benefit of the doubt if he wanted to say more. And he wrote something very like, thoughtful about it. But I didn't reach out to the guy who's toxic, obviously, because that's a door I'm not interested in opening up. And I don't think anyone who has been in a toxic relationship should reopen up that door either.
Yeah, no, I noticed that, and I was really happy to see that, because I think after you read that chapter, no one wants to hear from the guy who's toxic.
Yeah.
It was like, that was good. We don't care what he has to say. But I know reading this, I had a tingle of a thought like, should I reach out to my exes? Not because I'm writing about them, but because I want just closure. Like there's so many people I know that I've hurt or who have hurt me. So I know people are going to read this book and I know they're going to think, should I reach out to my exes? So what does Gabi have to say about that?
I wish I actually ended up making a quiz that's we used to promote the book called Should I Text My Ex? And it was basically with quarantine during this time, should you text your ex? And I really do wish that quiz was in the book. I think it's going to be in some of the Kindles or some of the digital books. I think they're adding that as like a bonus thing. But I will summarize it for your listeners about if you should reach out to your ex. I do think that reaching out to your ex for closure after enough time has passed is a great thing. And I'm lucky that I had the excuse of my writing my book to do this. But I do think that, if enough time has passed and if your intentions are right, so your intention should not be that you want to get back together with them. It should be coming from a place that, you accept wherever they are in their life and you're reaching out because you missed their friendship or whatever, or you just want to like check in on them, or you just want to have a conversation that you're finally ready to maturely and calmly have after all these years, then I would say reach out to them. But if you're reaching out because you want to prove that you're better than them now or that you won or like any of that stuff, I would highly recommend against that. But I know you, Jen, I don't think that would be your intention of reaching out to them.
Yeah,
I feel like you would do it for closure, which I think is a great reason.
I know, because sometimes it keeps me up at night. I'm like, ooh, it ended so bad. And I just want that person to know, like, I'm sorry, I wasn't mature enough. Or like, even guys who like hurt me and did things like that. Like, I just want to be like, look, it's over. And I want to just live in this world with you, like no hard feelings. Yeah. But I also feel like maybe it's not the best idea because, well, when you're with someone or you see that they're with someone else with kids, it's like, do you even want to open up that door? So what advice do you have for the person who's like you, like you're in a relationship now, I'm in a relationship now. What advice do you have in that aspect of, is it even worth it to open up that door if both of you have moved on and you don't want to potentially even hurt your new partner?
Well, I think, obviously the first person you should talk about is your new partner. If your new partner thinks that it's okay to do it. And if your new partner has, because obviously that's the person who matters the most to you, right? So make sure that they're okay with it. And then if your partner is supportive of it, I mean, you could use my book as an excuse. You could say, I just read this book where this girl like interviewed all her exes and she got a lot of closure from it. And like, hey, I've just been thinking about how things ended and I see that you're married now or whatever. And I'm so happy for you, but I just wanted to let you know. And then I guess what you should say is something that your own closure, like what you always wanted to say to this person, but also at the same time know that when you send it, you might not hear back from them, and that's fine, but at least you said what you wanted to say, and best case scenario, you hear back. Worst case scenario, you don't hear back, but at least you reached out. I will say that if you do reach out to your exes, LinkedIn tends to be the best way to do it because it feels the least invasive and the most professional way to reach out to an ex as opposed to sliding into their DMs or texting them.
Okay, I'm like obsessed with that because I feel like people don't even, like people so write off LinkedIn, but I feel like you're totally right. Like I feel like a LinkedIn message is like, hey, let's keep it professional. Let's keep it like PG up in here rather than like Instagram where it's insinuating that you want more. I love that. I'm going to start using LinkedIn to contact all my exes and maybe even some.
You should. And you could even say, like if they got a new, hey, I see you're working here. Congratulations. Like, you know what I mean? Like you could keep it as professional as you want.
I love it. We have a question from Danny in the You're Not Getting Any Younger Facebook group. She says, Gabi, I love your book so much. I could relate to so much of it, but I'm still single. And I feel like, I've dated a lot of the guys in the book and even beyond that. How will I know if I'm ever going to find someone? Because right now I'm just feeling like I am a dating professional who's never going to find the person I'm meant to be with.
Well, I think you will find that person that you are meant to be with. But I know I've heard this so many times when I was single and I thought it was such BS where it's like, you meet the person you're supposed to be with when you're least expecting it. And I could tell you that was totally true. I mean, I was someone who was single for years. And then I really thought that my last chance of love was my last relationship. And so when that ended, I kind of accepted. I was like, I'm just going to be single forever. And that's fine. And I do think it's like the moment you really relish in being single and the moment you feel like you're really, truly living your best life and you're the most like confident and like everything is going like your way, that's usually when you'll meet your person. And I would say the best way to meet your person is to be unapologetically you on the date, on your dating app, like however you're meeting people, because you don't want to meet someone who is attracted to a different version of you, because that will, over time, that's usually why relationships don't work. If you're unapologetically yourself and you attract, like on a dating app, you might find out that you're like matching with less people, but the people that you are matching with have a higher quality of developing a relationship with and being someone who's worth it for you.
I could not agree with that more. I mean, to meet Adam, my fiance, I went on 14 dates in a month. I know you've done something so similar. And by the end of the dates, like by the end of all these dates, I was just so beat down that I had no choice but to be myself. I didn't even have the energy to be someone else. And I just remember showing up to the date being so unapologetically myself that it could have been even like a little too much. But I was proud of myself because I didn't have any more time to waste on these dates. So that's beautiful advice. And I think one of the last things I want you to share is, you know, you took a huge chance. You left LA where your life was, where a big part of your career was, where your friends were, and you moved to New York for a relationship that ended up not working out. And now you are back in LA. And I mean, I've been following you on Instagram. You're living an amazing life, it seems. You're doing a lot. You have an amazing boyfriend. You're working your ass off. So I want people to hear from you, like, when you go out on a limb like that and you move cross country and then it doesn't work out, how did you recover? You know, how did you get through that? Because I think that that's so important to hear.
Well, I think at the time I was devastated and I was heartbroken, but at the same time, I think like after enough time had passed and I looked back, I had realized that there were so many signs that that relationship was not going to work out, and I just ignored them. So after that, in my dating life, I never did that again. But I think, you know, I think accepting that it's okay to be heartbroken, I think focusing on myself as much as I could. I did take a little bit of a break from dating, not just because I was living with my parents for 4 months, but also it's because I was like writing a book and like didn't really need to like go on dates. But I definitely think, you know, I really felt like when I moved back to LA, I definitely had come back with like my priorities were in a different place. I was like super work focused. I was open to the possibility of like meeting someone. But at the same time, when I was going on dates, I was kind of just accepting guys for who they were. And I wasn't finding myself trying to make someone something they weren't, which is what I learned through writing my book. So like if I was going on a date with a guy, it was pretty obvious had like commitment issues or like wasn't interested in a relationship, I wouldn't continue to date him if I was at a point in my life where I was looking for a relationship. So I think that was the biggest thing, is to realize, you know, it's okay to be sad when you're going through a breakup, like cry, watch those rom-coms, drink that wine, do whatever you do that makes you feel better. But like it does get better and every day gets better. And I think refocusing on yourself and things that you can control at the end of the day, eventually, if you want to meet a person, you meet a person. And if you don't meet someone, that's also fine too. Like, I think we think that we need to settle down, but that's really just society. So I think it's like really do what makes you happy and never settle for a relationship that doesn't improve your life. Relationships shouldn't be making your life harder.
Amen. And you are such a strong, badass female who has really created a career for yourself over the years. I mean, you have such an unconventional career, and I envy that and value that. And I think that is something that people should think about, is like relationships are not, they don't make you whole. No. You make you whole. And you are so much more than just a relationship. And I'm glad you got back to LA. I'm glad you got back into that. And Gabi, this book is fantastic. I mean it from the bottom of my heart. I wish I could like video myself reading it, because I was smiling ear to ear the whole time. Yay. And I want to end this interview like we end them all. So I'm going to ask you a question to fill in the blank. All right. Fill in the blank. You're not getting any younger. So
stop listening to that biological clock. Like you're not getting younger, so do what you want to do with your life, live your best life, and don't do what other people tell you you should do or what you think you should be doing at this age.
I love that. Turn the clock off. And Gabi, where can people find out more about you and your book and become your virtual BFF?
Yes. Well, you can follow me on Instagram. It's Gabi Conti. That's ITSGABICONTI. Same on Twitter, where I'm less active, or my website, gabiconti.com, GABICONTI. On my website, there's a link where you can click on a link where all of my other links for where the book is sold. You can find it, but the book is available wherever books are sold. And yeah, let's be friends.
Yay, Gabi. This was so awesome. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Hey, you. Thank you for listening to the You're Not Getting Any Younger podcast. There are hundreds of thousands of pods out there, so thank you for listening to this one. You can find the show notes for this week's episode up on our website, anyyounger.com. Subscribe, rate, and review the You're Not Getting Any Younger podcast on iTunes so that other ears around the world can listen too. Oh, and join our secret You're Not Getting Any Younger Facebook group, where over 1,000 people are talking about how to disrupt their lives, for a good reason, to make it count. Until next week, all my love, Jen Glantz.